Okay, so first of all, hi. How you all doing? For those that haven't met me, my name's Matt. I help run the MicroPython Meetup in Melbourne, which is a monthly meetup, which gives us a chance to discuss and hack away at any of our projects that use MicroPython. At the meetups, I usually give a sort of a news update, what's been happening in the last month or so. But with COVID-19 spoiling the fun and not allowing us to get together, I thought I'd record a session and put it out there. Now, you have to excuse me, it's quite a bumper list of news items because it's been a couple of months since we've met and sort of recorded one of these. But yeah, look, I hope everyone's doing well given COVID-19. I hope you're all safe and well. Anyway, let's get into it. Oh, I should mention I'm very easy to get in touch with. Feel free to reach out for anything if you want more detail or give me feedback. That'd be great. So yeah, plenty of details about how to get in touch with me there. And I also thought I'd start with some links. These are sort of the common things we send people when they're trying to get information about MicroPython. So obviously the root of it all, micropython.org. Most of these things can be found linked from there somewhere as well. There's the GitHub there, which is the repository, just actually MicroPython/MicroPython, where most of the activity happens. A lot of it's driven from the issues and the PRs there, so feel free. It's a really active repository. And there's a forum, quite an active forum. If you need questions answered, it's a great place to go and do that. There's also the Slack channel, which is now about 300 strong, and it's quite active as well. So if you need questions answered promptly, it's a good place to go. Anyone can get a link, anyone can get an invite by hitting up this Heroku app. And then finally, there's also the blog that I've put together, which hosts all of the material that we've been recording at the Melbourne meetups. I'm a little bit behind. I think it's been updated since the November meetup. But I'll endeavour to get that updated soon, especially with this material. So that'd be good to meet the team. I've only focused on two of the people that are working on MicroPython. They happen to be the two most core people. But I kind of feel that sometimes when you're working on open source, you kind of forget that there's actually people there, not just like usernames. And also, I was just referring to these people a lot in the slides. So, obviously, Damien George is the founder and creator of MicroPython. So, you have a face for the name. And Jim's been working pretty solidly on MicroPython for over a year. Well, he's been with the project for a long while, but quite seriously on it for about a year or so. Both these guys are really pushing forward with development on the project. So, you'll see their names come up a lot. And having met them, apart from being exceptionally good software engineers, they're also just really lovely people, so I think we're really very fortunate to have them at the helm. So yeah, now you've got faces for names. MicroPython news. One of the bigger changes that are coming up is a complete rewrite that Damien did for the async IO module. So the latest version is kind of known as V3, but it's kind of better across the board. It's faster, it's got better compatibility with CPython, more features, it's smaller, it's a good test suite, it's just better in all ways really, so that's great. I'm really looking forward to playing with this. Peter has updated his async IO documentation, and Peter Hinch has written some fantastic documentation. It's a must read if you're using async IO, and if you're not using async IO, you should probably consider it. It's really useful in the embedded space. It's really useful in general, but especially in the embedded space. V3 will be an optional install for 1.12 releases, but it's become the default in dailies, and it will be in the future. Google Season of Docs. Right, so I should say, so what is Google's Season of Docs? It's an effort by the company to, foster collaboration between open source organizations and tech writers. The way it works is that organizations apply to be part of Season of Docs, and so do tech writers. Now, some of those are selected and married together, and so Google pays the tech writers to work on the open source projects for a few months. I guess this came out of an acknowledgement, I suppose, that open source isn't always the best documented place. So this is an effort to improve documentation for open source projects. So the first time they were out was last year, and we applied. We weren't successful last year, but we're going to apply again. And so Jim's taking the lead on that. But please go for a read of last year's application. It's still hosted online, and go have a look at the work that came out of the Season Docs effort last year. I think it's really good. Like there's quite a lot of fantastic work that you would definitely recognise a lot of the projects that were selected. Yeah, and so I think this really has the potential to dramatically improve our documentation here. Right, so just a quick note, I've thrown in some purple slides. That's wherever we've covered this topic in previous meetups. So I'll just skip over them, but I've just copied them in from old sessions. Right, so Lego Spike Prime. This is super exciting for me because I'm a Lego nerd. Who wasn't? Like, I loved Lego when I was growing up. So Scott Hanselman, who you might know if you're sort of in the fringe of the .NET or Windows development world. Scott's a really charismatic guy and very prolific. And he runs a podcast called Hanselminutes that he's been running for years. Anyway, he interviewed Ralph Hempel, who's the lead firmware engineer at Lego. And it's really exciting because they're using MicroPython for the latest stuff in Lego, for all the Mindstorms and stuff that uses programming. So Ralph, I think it was, if I understand right, it was before he was actually employed by Lego. He worked on the EV3 brick, which I've got a photo of here. This thing here. That's sort of the current Mindstorms brick as the processing arm, which you plug things into it and control. But yeah, Ralph worked on that, and then he built, like, it actually runs, that's a full-blown Linux install. And so he put together a MicroPython build for it that allows you to run MicroPython and control it through the EV3 brick. But now Lego Spike Prime's come along, you can see it's not the cheapest thing. It's designed for classrooms at the moment. You can only buy it through Lego Education, which is a sort of a subsection of Lego. You get a bunch of sensors and stuff, but it's $700 because you want to get the extension kit as well. But yeah, we can run MicroPython on Lego now, which is pretty cool. It works with, they've sort of got two ways you can write for it. You can use MIT's Scratch, so they've got a Scratch implementation which generates MicroPython, or you can flip across and just use MicroPython directly. So yeah, it's kind of what the main kit looks like, and these are the kind of things you can build. That's what the brick looks like these days, and it's like it's 100 meg Cortex M4, 300k of RAM and mega flash. It's got this 5x5 matrix LEDs in the front. It's got like an accelerometer and a speaker and stuff. And this is all aimed at like 10-year-olds. The 10-year-old me would have loved this. Alright, moving right along. So MicroPython-lib, for those that don't know, it's a collection of, I guess they're official libraries for MicroPython. It's run under the MicroPython GitHub account. But they do need some TLC. They've been a little bit unloved over the years. So Jim started a discussion on the Slack channel, which is culminated in 376 to reorganise MicroPython. And this is to basically get rid of a lot of the cruft. There's a bunch of stuff in there that's just placeholder libraries that were intended to be built that weren't, or stuff that's no longer useful. So there's a real push to try and get that back up to speed and back up to a much better quality. I personally want to take this a little further. I would like to see, I've made up this table here, it's fake data, there's nothing in here that's real, but I would like to have like a table of information which showed like a row for each of the standard Python libraries and whether we have MicroPython support and what state that's in. And then I'd like to think we could sort of start backfilling that as a community. There is 250 libraries, so this is not a small undertaking, but a lot of them are pure Python, so we can probably pull a lot of them in relatively easily. And if performance dictates that we need to write some parts within C, then that's fine too. Anyway, MicroPython did some effort to try and make that a bit better. Also, to improve things, the MicroPython wiki, there's actually two of them at the moment. There's one that's using the GitHub wikis, the GitHub wiki feature, and then there's one hosted on micropython.org. Both of them contain some useful stuff, but they're actually pretty out of date, and neither are well maintained. So the goal is to consolidate them into one. It's on Jim's long list of tasks. And when it's up, we'll ask people for contributions when it's in a place where we can all work on it. Okay, so the Loboris port. I won't go into detail as much as I was originally going to, but Loboris port was started by a guy named Boris Lovosevich, who was super prolific. He really put together a whole bunch of features to expose a lot of the unique things about the ESP32. Really feature rich, but it did diverge quite a long way from mainline MicroPython. But there's a lot of stuff like he's had a really good build system, Neopixels support, like heaps and heaps of different features. And people often want some of these features, and they haven't all made it back to mainline yet. So we're aware of this. We're trying to get some of these features back, but they did diverge a lot, and Loboris port had the benefit of focusing only on the ESP32, whereas we need at least the core features of MicroPython to be the same across all of the ports. Otherwise, the language itself will sort of diverge and not be so useful. So we need to pull these in a bit carefully. Some of them already have done, so some of the ones that strike throughs I think have already got good mainline support. I haven't finished updating all of this, but I've been trying to collect links to all of the different features that have had PRs raised, etc. on mainline. So I'm aware that all this is going on. Perhaps reach out if you really want or need some of these features. Some of them are easier to pull in than others, but almost none of them sort of come for free, so they take some effort. Some other little features that I saw had gone in that were useful and worth noting. Little FS is it's an alternative to the FAT file system that's been implemented previously in MicroPython. We're switching that to the default for ESP32 and ESP8266 for future releases. It's an obvious thing to do because LibFS has got the benefit of being much more robust. It's designed for an embedded file system, which FAT wasn't. Much more difficult to corrupt, especially in the face of power loss and that kind of stuff. The problem, I guess the consequence of LibFS is that for platforms that have native USB support, you can't mount those devices under Windows, right? So you can't plug it in and get that nice, appears like a USB NAS storage device because LibFS it's a different layout to the file system. Now ESP32 and ESP8266 don't have native USB support, so you get all the benefits and none of the downsides really of having that. So yeah, that'll be the default. Oh, I should mention too, it also uses less memory. So particularly on the ESP8266, I think you get something like about 20k of extra RAM at startup, which is pretty handy on that platform. There are a bunch of BLE improvements that went in. So the BLE implementation now is kicking along quite nicely. It's really good. So go have a look at that if you're interested. And Jim worked on something which came from CircuitPython as well. I think the idea had been kicking around for a while, but they did a really good job of implementing it in CircuitPython where you can compress all of the error strings and it saves a bunch of memory. Now, on the smaller platforms, the STM32 L0s and ESP8266 and stuff, that can make quite a difference. So it's quite a neat little feature. Expressive news while we're on the ESP32 and 8266. Rainmaker. So Expressive announced that they were going to support this Rainmaker system. It appears to be like Expressive's kind of cloud play, I suppose. It's kind of three components. It's a device SDK. It's a cloud system, and it's some mobile applications. And it's kind of interesting. So the idea would be that on the device you would advertise parameters that you want to be exposed through into the cloud and through the device. And you can mark those parameters up with metadata. And so the idea would be you'd run a generic program, at least to begin with, on the phone, which when you connect to the device can query for all the metadata that the device is advertising. And so you can say, hey, I want a toggle switch, or I want a slider that goes from 0 to 100, and that represents HSV or something like that. And so the application can just select down that metadata and produce controls to modify those parameters and send it back to the device. And it's very transparent, very neat way to do things. So this is going to be enabled out of the box for the new ESP32S2, which we'll talk about in a sec. This is kind of what the application looks like. You can get sliders which are populated with information that you supply as metadata. And the Rainmaker agent sits just above the ESP IDF, so it's sort of an optional thing that's built on top of the IDF. We don't know a lot about it yet, it's only been released recently, so I don't know what the pricing's like, I don't know which devices are going to be supported yet. But it certainly looks like a pretty powerful option in terms of getting information or increasing that ability to communicate with your mobile phone applications. There's a little video you can go watch, and it's quite impressive. It shows how they streamline the way that the device is connected to from the phone. And in this particular case, they can really easily control the LED, both the colour and whether it's on or not. Cool. Sion, the unexpected maker, has been building his Pro S2 board, which is an ESP32S2 development board. It's probably worth having a quick refresh actually. I'm glad I put these in to remind me. The ESP32S2 is made by Espressif, and it's sort of an evolution of the ESP32, but it's not exactly an upgrade in all senses. So it's worth having a look at what the differences are. So obviously it adds USB, that's kind of the big key feature, which the ESP32 has lacked. But it's only a single core, although it's a more powerful core, particularly for floating point operations. Their ULP, the ultra-low processor, that was in the ESP32, was a quirky little thing, and they're replacing that with a RISC-V low-power coprocessor, which looks I'm really excited about that actually. They've dropped Bluetooth, which is kind of a big loss. A lot of people see that as a big stumbling block. They've added more GPO, they've added more touch, they've added a few other sort of software features as well, around controlling displays and stuff. Well, not quite software, they're actually got hardware support for it, but anyway, there's a whole bunch of other things that are different. It's also cheaper, so you can see it's not really an obvious upgrade. It's a different chip that's related, I suppose. Anyway, USB is kind of the key feature that's got everyone excited, and Sion's going to put together a couple of videos. One of them where he's investigated the USB stack and whether it works or not. I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say that it does eventually. It's still very early days of this chip. So you should follow along on Sion's YouTube channel. You should also follow along in Scott Shawcroft's work. Sorry, Scott. He gives a deep dive in the ESP32S2, and I think he's going to do a few of these. Scott's the lead dev, I suppose, on or certainly one of the driving forces of CircuitPython, and he's a great developer as well. So yeah, they're very excited about the ESP32S2 because CircuitPython requires USB mass storage. Like all of their devices support USB, so you can get that nice beginner-friendly plug-in and go CircuitPython experience. That's what they're shooting for, is to have a really good beginner experience. So the ESP32S2 is the first chip from Espressif that they can actually sort of use for CircuitPython. And so Scott's going into quite a lot of detail about the port for that and the efforts that they're going to support it. Limor and Phil also recorded a video about the ESP32S2. There's a ton of interest for this chip. While on Adafruit, I should say too, they've had to halt production of their electronics. They're in New York and they do manufacturing in New York. So they've halted their electronics and they're making gear for like PPE for frontline COVID-19 workers. I just wanted to give them a shout out because it's really impressive to see what they're doing, because a bunch of their workforce aren't really working at the moment because they can only use about a quarter of them to do this pivot, I guess, to manufacture this PPE stuff. But they continue to pay all of their staff. They're doing everything sort of right. So I just want to give a shout out to to fill in more. It's really cool to see how they're doing that. You can still buy Adafruit hardware through distributors, like DigiKey is supporting obviously Stockton, and locally here in Australia we've got Little Bird and a couple of others. Despite all that, they also just released CircuitPython 5.3, which has got support for RGB matrix displays, those big rectangular displays. They've got improvements to their STM32 port, to MicroLab, the ULab library, and a heap more stuff. So go check that out. It's well worth it. CircuitPython's a really, really great, friendly fork of MicroPython. Talking about ESP32 stuff, especially stuff, so I thought I'd mention with Neopixels and ESP32, we know that there's a spurious error with Neopixels and ESP32, and this is kind of a long-standing thing that we've got to try and fix. You'll occasionally get glitches on it. Now, this kind of stems from the fact that we're building on top of FreeRTOS, because the ESP-IDF is built on top of FreeRTOS, and it will periodically interrupt the system. Only for a very short time, but Neopixels are timing sensitive, and so that will introduce glitches. Now, there's a few different ways to drive Neopixels, at least on the ESP32 platform. Currently, we're just banging in C with some careful timing. I helped expose the RMT module, which is RMT stands for remote. It's a bit of hardware that's in the ESP32 that allows you to send and receive bits of very accurate, with very accurate timing. Josh Lloyd has built a library on top of RMT, on RMT system. It does do quite accurate timing because it avoids the glitch the OS can trigger, but that uses quite a lot of memory at the moment. So that's an alternative way to drive your Neopixels. FastLED is a separate library typically supported in the Arduino platform, which is a really rich library. People have built that as a module inside MicroPython, so you can go scour the forums to see people who've done that. That also works. They use RMT internally. And the Loboris port mentioned before also uses RMT. All of those, and rather none of those are perfect. So the idea would be that we would probably, the best bet is to extend the RMT solution to better support the driving in Neopixels. So at the moment we haven't got a fantastic solution. If you've only got small numbers of LEDs, the library built on top of RMT is probably the best one. But we're aware of this problem, we're trying to improve it. So if you want to help out with that, please let me know. Seeeduino had some really interesting stuff. This was a slide from our last in-person meetup back in January. Which was my last one, actually. There was another one in February. The Seeeduino XIAO is a SAMD21, which looks quite neat. So that's what kind of kicked it off, and then they dropped this one, so the WIO terminal, which is a pretty neat little device, the SAMD51. It's a Cortex M4, 120 meg, quite a powerful little micro. I really like these SAMDs. Got a neat 320x240 LCD bolted onto the front. It's got BLE and Wi-Fi. That's provided by the Realtek chip, and we looked at that Realtek chip recently at a meetup. It's awesome. So it's like a little Cortex M0, I think, from memory. But it provides BLE and Wi-Fi, but it also does dual band Wi-Fi, so it also has 5 gig. And it looks like it'll run MicroPython as well independently, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, that chip's used to provide radio comms for this device. We also jammed in an IMU, a pretty cute little joystick kind of button on the front, and a buzzer and a microphone, all this kind of stuff. We've got Grove ports all over the thing. There's a light sensor in there. And on the back of it, they've got like a 40-pin Raspberry Pi compatible expansion port, so you can expand it a bit further. We also announced Arduino and MicroPython support, and we'll talk about the MicroPython support in a moment because it's via this ArduPi, it's hard to say, ArduPi project, which is Seed's own project. Our device it's kind of large-ish, but not not big, but it's quite thin, 12 mil. It's $30 US. It's pretty amazing. They also released at the same time the battery chassis, which is kind of neat. 650 milliamp hour battery. It plugs onto the 40-pin expansion header, and it actually has a pass-through for it. Breaks out a whole bunch more Grove ports. It's $10. So that's so I've got these on order, but I haven't received them yet. So yeah, ArduPy is a combination of Arduino and MicroPython. It's a project by Seed. As best I can tell, it's kind of like two things. It looks like they've got like a MicroPython port to build on top of the Arduino APIs, I think. Not sure. But also, like, they give examples that it's easier to pull in an Arduino library and have it exposed and usable in MicroPython. So it looks super interesting. I'm kind of curious to play with it, but I haven't dug into this very much yet. So again, if someone else knows more, please let me know. Okay, so Seed also announced support for these. Well, they're distributing Seeeduino modules. This is the M1N. And this thing's built on top of that awesome Kendrite K210 micro, which we've covered a few times. It's a dual core, 400 meg, 64-bit RISC-V. It's got 8 meg of RAM, 8 meg of flash. This particular module. 2 meg of that RAM is dedicated to the neural net processing unit, which requires a bit of investigation. But basically, it's a block of hardware that accelerates the kind of mathematical operations that are used for your TensorFlow kind of libraries. So they've got 2 meg of RAM dedicated for that kind of processing. This module has a 640 by 480 camera. You can plug into it over that 24-pin socket. And it's actually, if you look at it, if you look at that picture, that's the module on top. And below it, there's a breakout board which allows you. It's breadboard compatible pins. Well, it's standard header pins, and they've used an M2 connector, but it's not. They're only using the connector. It's not an M2 layout. It's just for the convenience of the connector. But yeah, that module's tiny, and it's $10. It's amazing. And so they're sort of advertising it as a neural net accelerator. Right. And of course, just more recently, they announced that they didn't support the MakePython, which is a device that uses one of these M1Ns internally, but they plug on a display on the front. You're sort of seeing a pattern emerge here, right? M5 stack WIO terminal. This, yeah, it's got a little rocker switch on the top. It's got a couple of buttons. It's got a camera on the back with a small, they call it an SP mod expansion port. I don't really know what that is, but there's some GPIOs that come out of it. And this is $25 US. And they're advertising, of course, I should say Seeeduino, for those that haven't listened on some of their earlier stuff, Seeeduino actually have their own port of MicroPython called MakePython, which is actually getting quite rich and quite good. And so it's supported on this device. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, a bunch of stuff from the Seed. That was exciting. M5 stack, they're always releasing new stuff, but most of it's built around these Atom devices, which we covered over the past few months. Oh yeah, okay, so I've actually got a couple here that we can show you. Okay, so this is the Atom Matrix. I should have powered it on, but it's got a 5x5 RGB LED behind this panel that you can see quite clearly when it's on. So the whole front face is actually a button as well. They've got a reset switch here, and they've got a bunch of GPIO breakouts here. USB C powered and for comms, and effectively like a Grove, or what do they call them? I can't remember, but it's an expansion port in the bottom. They've also got the Atom Light, which is the same sort of thing, except it's just got one RGB LED and a button. But it's a whole bunch narrower. Well, these things are tiny to begin with, so you can see it's the matrix is a bit thicker. Do take some care though, because the LEDs shouldn't be run at full brightness, because they generate too much heat and pull too much power if you have them all on at once. So if you want to fry one of these things, I suspect if you ran them at full white, they'd have a bit of trouble. Right. So one of the nice things is that M5 Stack have been releasing videos, so how to program the M5 atom with MicroPython. I've got a couple already, and it looks like they'll grow that. These devices have become really popular because they're quite cheap. They're I should have gone back to here. They're $6 US and $9 US with a microcontroller, a fairly powerful microcontroller that does Wi-Fi, and they're 24mm square. It's just pretty awesome stuff. They also released UI Flow, which is they've got this system to do development for all of the devices in a Blockly, which is similar to Scratch, system. So it's all done in the web browser, and you kind of drag objects around and stick them together. It's actually pretty good. It's pretty impressive. For anything that's more than a trivial application, I find it gets really unwieldy quite quickly. But for getting people up and running with it, it's pretty nice. And so their latest update adds support for the added devices, so you can choose which device you're coding against and all the different peripherals it has. They also support a whole bunch of they've got dozens of Grove sensors and buttons and so on. You can plug all those things into this thing. And you can also toggle between Blockly and MicroPython, so you can see the code that it generates, and you can take that code and use that if you want to. But they've been releasing this series of how to use UI Flow. I think they're up to less than 10 at the moment. It looks like they'll do a few more, and they're pretty well done. And they've started releasing ways to expand the atoms as well. So this is the atomic kit, which allows you to drop in one of the atoms on the front of it and have just a little area for prototyping. So if you want to extend it with like a sensor of your own, this is a really neat way to do it, and it's $3.50 US. It's pretty good. They've got if you're interested in RS405, just got like an add-on to it. Plug it in, and it does the voltage conversions and serial out. $5 US. And they've got a battery as well, so just a 190 mAh battery, which charges over USB on the bottom. It's got a button to turn it on and a LED. Knowing how M5 Stack works, they'll probably be releasing more peripherals pretty rapidly. MicroPython FPGAs, I thought I'd throw this in there because it kicked off with some exciting news that Tim Hansel's been working hard on this stuff for a long time. Mithro is his name. Shout out to Mithro and Zobs, how you guys doing? But Hackaday wrote an article about, it summarised a bunch of Mithro's work. This is to get some open source FPGA tooling in place. And I guess the key announcement was that they're getting to the point now where Xilinx Series 7 is supported. That's really cool news because it's widely used. Previously they'd had Lattice support, and Lattice support's been really good, but Lattice only only a small segment of the market. Why does any of this matter for MicroPython? It doesn't really, except that MicroPython is a good match for some of these things. So often what you want to do is you get an FPGA, and I'm kind of assuming that you guys know what FPGAs are, but if you don't, go look them up. They're a way of grabbing some configurable hardware and using some high definition languages, you can configure how that hardware behaves, and you can specify timing constraints, and it's kind of like software for hardware. Anyway, it's really common to take one of the FPGAs and put like a soft core device in there, which is it's a CPU, a microcontroller, for example, that's sort of defined in an HDL, so the FPGA can route it into the FPGA logic gates. So for all intents and purposes, it's like we've got the common thing is to use a RISC-V processor as part of your FPGA. And so once you've got a RISC-V processor, then you need to be able to control that, and you would normally put something, some software on it. MicroPython's a good fit here because it allows you to put a MicroPython port onto your simulated or into your softcore RISC-V, for example, and then you can control the other things on that FPGA by exposing them. So there's a lot of moving parts in this, but MicroPython's a really nice complement to some of those efforts. And we've got some good devices now that are coming out. So we covered the FOMO in the past, which is this tiny little, it's amazing. It's an ICE40 based FPGA, so it's a small FPGA, but it fits inside your USB port, and they're like $45. Greg Devil in South Australia, g'day Greg, has released his Orange Crab, which is a much bigger FPGA with 128 meg of RAM, and it's in a feather form factor, like the 8-bit feather form factor. They're about $100 US. And then there's the Seeeduino XIAO Tang. Now, I haven't seen MicroPython running on this one yet, but really recently they got the RISC-V softcore running on it. And so this is sort of a medium-size FPGA, if I understand it right, but they're only 20 US. It's quite amazing. So we did cover the Orange Crab previously and the phone a number of times. And I've got them here as well, so let me have a quick look and see. So that is a FOMO. It's tiny, even next to the already tiny Atom Matrix. And then we've got the Orange Crab. The Orange Crab's a beautiful little thing that Greg's made. Oh, come on, focus. There we go. So a couple of other features I really like is you can see the track length matching that he's employed here between the FPGA and the RAM. And it's hard to see, but there are dozens of 0201s for decoupling all over this thing that I believe Greg hand placed. So Greg, you're a wizard. Nice work. I'm looking forward to trying to get MicroPython running on this properly. At the moment, Greg's got a really basic port of CircuitPython running on it. I want to try and get MicroPython running on this thing. It's awesome. Okay. While on FPGA news, Seeeduino, I haven't met Seeeduino, but he's been running MicroPython on ICE40 with external HyperRAM, and he did a whole bunch of measurements on how well it's performing. He's also written up on how he did it, so yeah, that was pretty cool. If you're interested in this FPGA stuff, I suggest taking a look. Right, miscellaneous, which is probably half of... I've got 20 slides left, thinking, oh god. Right, so MakerFabs announced the ESP32 color LCD. They had an older version which just had a monochrome, basically the same with monochrome display here. This is nice because it's pretty inexpensive at 13 US. But nothing is I've seen a bunch of tutorials use with this device because it's kind of cheap and cheerful, and it's just really good for beginners. Just buy one of these and run through some of the tutorials they've put together. I came across this somewhere on Twitter. Rack Wireless I hadn't heard of before, but they have these wireless or radio modules. This one's it's got an NRF 52840 on it, and it's also got like CAT-M1, MB1, and GPS. I'll just cram on this little board. The boards are this is like $70 for a little board, which is it's actually pretty impressive hardware. But it looks like they're getting behind MicroPython because their boards seem to be supporting it now. So the Rack 4600 is another one of these Nordic chips with lower end 52832 with LoRa though, half the price. Both of them have, I'll say, supported MicroPython ports, but it requires you to basically check out mainline MicroPython, apply a patch that they provide from GitHub. So they're basic ports, but they do the job, and they do communicate. Like the LoRa one actually has a LoRa implementation, so you can send and receive packets. Earth LCD, which I'd stumbled across in the past, but I haven't really been aware of them. They make a wide range of industrial LCD and LCD controllers. and you can buy either the controller or the LCD module or both together. But they've announced that their next range, which is scheduled for later this year, will have MicroPython support out of the gate, and they're pretty powerful. Like they're basing a lot of their newer stuff on the STM32H7, which is a super powerful micro. Pretty decent sized touchscreen, so up to a 5-inch 800x480. So yeah, nice industrial sort of solutions, and not terribly expensive for that kind of hardware. I think I mentioned CircuitBrain's Xilinx is another a small SAMD51 board. They're advertising CircuitPython support, but if we pull our finger out and get better SAMD port for MicroPython, it'll also run happily as well. But it's a neat little board. For SAMD51, it's like, I think it's a bit over an inch square was where they're advertising it. Almost 30 mil square. Castellated, so you can drop it on your own board, single-sided, or you can solder in pins. Quite neat. The Pico Pew by Christian Walter. So this is part of a range of devices that was kicked off by Radomir Dobrowski, who's better known as Deshipu. He's been doing these kind of retro gaming devices for a while, including building his own software libraries to support them. And so Christian took that, and this is really at the kind of the lower end, but it's so cute, and so yeah, whimsical is the word I used. It's got like an 8x8 red-green matrix, which means you can actually have 256 shades of colours there. It's just as long as you shade them between red and green. And this little device is 21 US from Tindy, sorry, and lets you do some basic games like Snake or whatever. And the idea is that you would grab a tiny Pico, which all of you know the tiny Pico, I'm sure, and you mount it in reverse. You can just see it sitting out from behind. Otherwise, you get this tiny little console. Yeah, I've got one of these too. So, where are we? So that's what it looks like. As you can see, it's tiny. The buttons are only just really big enough to use. I've only just received this recently, so I haven't even soldered it together yet. But the idea would be that the tiny Pico would mount. There's some headers that you need to solder onto the back of this guy. And it just sort of mounts in the back there. It's a tiny little kit. So yeah, it's kind of cool. Right, there's a beginner level course on, I'm going to screw this name up, Makeademy? Oh, that makes more sense. Makeademy, right. So it's Introduction to MicroPython using the PyBoard. It's been reduced from like 200 US to 25 US. I'm not sure what was the motivation for the reduction, but if you're just starting out with the PyBoard and MicroPython, it looks like a really good course. There's about 20 videos ranging from a few minutes to almost half an hour. And Jim went through it and gave me some feedback and says that it's a slightly older version of MicroPython they're using, and there's a few minor technical inaccuracies, but they're all inconsequential. So it's slow moving, but really good for a beginner, it seems. Yeah, and he said there's 3 worked examples that look really quite useful. So yeah, if you find the standard documentation a bit overwhelming, and you're really looking for something to take you as a raw beginner, this might be a really good option. MiniPB, so this is a pure Python Google Protocols buffers library, so if you've used Google Protocol buffers before, you'll probably be interested in this. They also advertise that it's supported on MicroPython, including documenting workarounds to suggest keeping your memory use low, which also included cross-compiling and freezing the module. It looks like a really neat way to do proto buffers. So, for those that don't know, proto buffers is a way of serializing data on the wire. So you define your protocol in an IDL, and then you can send packets of that protocol on the wire, and encode and decode it on either end. Should also mention there's a really popular library which is written for microcontrollers to do this. It's a C library. Nano PB. So yeah, that's a really good option as well. But of course, Mini PB, previous one, would be much easier to use. It's almost certainly going to be slower. Nano PB is designed to be really low memory use and designed to be quite fast for micros. But of course, you'll need to wrap it in a user module, so it's a bit more work. So I mean, I'd start with Mini PB. If it provided enough performance, great. If not, you've got Nano PB as a fallback, and you just need to wrap that up. WaspOS. Now this is really cool. Right, so for the Pine Time Watch, which we covered ages ago. Okay, so we'll start with the Pine Time Watch. It's got a Nordic processor, just as a refresher, 64K RAM, 512K flash, and a bunch of peripherals. So a touch screen, an IPS display, 240 by 240. It's quite neat. Accelerometer, heart rate sensor. The key thing here is it's 25 US for enough hardware that could sit on your wrist and be useful. So with WaspOS, Daniel Thompson's built this MicroPython operating system for a watch to target this device. So what has he done? Actually, let's have a look at it first. I don't have WaspOS itself running, but I thought it's worth having a quick look at the Pine Time Watch if you haven't seen it before. This is the developer kit, which has the back separated. Button on the side to activate it, touchscreen, which is quite sensitive. This is the standard operating system, if you will, that comes with the device. But it's remarkably neat. The hardware is surprisingly well put together, especially for that price point. Got the battery on the back here, and if you pry, you can see the heart rate sensor. If you pry that off, right, you can see a whole bunch of other interesting bits and pieces, including, if you look carefully, there's like 4 pins which are used for programming. I don't know if you can see them, but this is the programming adapter they give you, which is, beautiful use of hot glue here. But you line them up and carefully push them in to JTAG program. But this is quite neat, quite cool. Okay, that's the watch hardware. Right, so what Daniel's done is basically build the software to generate the clock face, to be a stopwatch, to play the game of life, which is kind of, it's a bit apt and a bit sad that John Conway passed away recently. But yeah, so it's early days and moving fast. But he's still got things like basic power saving. So he's got wake from interrupts. So he's driving it to sleep, as you'd expect. He's got the battery level, so he's interfacing with the gas gauge. He's got most drivers happening. He's chosen to use the Adafruit NRF52 bootloader, which is quite smart. He's modified a little bit so it doesn't need the other inputs that it often has. But once you get that bootloader on, you can then do over-the-air BLE updates, which is really, really kind of nice. So this project's really cool. I'm really looking forward to having a couple of hours to spend playing with this. So go check it out. It's cool. He's recorded a bunch of videos too, I should have mentioned. Everything from like how the settings works to how to create applications for it, and like a preview on the M2 pre-release. So he's got this roadmap of features that he wants to release. He's really well organised. I'm looking forward to playing this project. What we're talking about, watch kind of things. We've got Watchy as well, which is an ESP32 smartwatch with an e-paper display, I guess is the key feature here. This is from Square Afumi, who also made previously the Badgie, which we covered ages ago, which is ESP8266 e-paper badge, which was used for a conference, or intended for use in a conference. $55 US. E-paper displays tend to be a bit more expensive. But there is some quality concerns with this one. It's kind of a bare board with an e-paper splattered onto it, so it's not. It's a bit delicate, a bit fragile. So I would, consider this a DIY sort of watch. You'd want to probably build your own housing, that kind of stuff. Can't mention other watches without mentioning the TTGO watch, which is about $40 US. Again, ESP32 powered. Again with a decent display on it, accelerometer, the rest of that stuff. And e-paper leads into Inkplate, which we covered in January as well. But since then, it's been successfully funded on Crown Supply. It's a 6-inch e-ink display that they took about what's it called? Using old Kindle displays for this, repurposing them, I suppose. Again, ESP32, 8 meg RAM. Advertising Arduino and MicroPython support, though I don't think anything's been released for either of those just yet. It's $100 US, it's not the cheapest, but again, e-paper not cheap. So and they're also advertising an enclosure, which came a little bit after the initial crowd supply page went up. A couple of capacitive touch buttons on the side there. It's if you want to play with e-paper, this is a neat little place to start. Or you could wait around for paperd.inc, which hasn't been released yet, but there's registration for interest. It's a 4.2 inch display, so it's a little bit smaller. 400 by 300 though, so it's not bad resolution. No word yet if this will have MicroPython support. In fact, details are a bit thin on the ground for this one, but if you're interested in e-paper, go check it out. Random nerd tutorials. So Rui and Sarah Santos, I've mentioned a couple of their tutorials in the past. They keep releasing really good material. If you want to do stuff like using MQTT to publish BME readings to one of the many MQTT servers on the web, they've got great guides on how to do that. There's also a neat one on driving the SSD 1306 OLED display. These are all MicroPython tutorials. And if you're interested in ESP Now, these are actually Arduino only at the moment, but if you want to know how ESP Now works, there's a few people have been asking about that. Go check out these other tutorials. It talks about it from the low-level stuff all the way up through receiving data from multiple boards. Cool. And speaking of excellent tutorials, Mauro Riva, who runs his blog Lemma River, has really excellent MicroPython tutorials, like using Google Cloud Platform to get, again, air quality data, and he's using the M5 stack Atom, which we looked at before. He's got a few tutorials on the Atom, including using LoRaWAN with Nexus SX1272, I think, and pushing data onto the Things network. And even just like a basic one, getting started on, and how to drive a 3-color e-ink display. These are all MicroPython tutorials, really good. I think this might be my last slide. The TMP102 driver written by Kevin Houlihan, we covered that a long time ago, before I actually started recording our sessions. But it's noteworthy because it covers all of the, or at least almost all of the features of the chip, and has good documentation, so you don't always get that in drivers. Not only that, Kevin recently documented how he'd written the driver, how he'd chosen to use it, because he used monkey patching to reduce memory use. I thought it was a really neat way to do it, and he was thinking specifically of MicroPython when he was doing this. So the idea would be that you would import certain features that you want to use for the temperature driver, but you might not need all of them. Like if you just want to get the information out of the chip, then that's easy. You do like import TMP102/basic or whatever, .basic. But if you want some of the more advanced features where the chip can do things like raise and interrupt when it gets out of range, or raise and interrupt when it's being shaken, all those kinds of stuff, they're written in other modules that get monkey patched into the same driver. So they only use more memory if you need the extra features. So I thought that was a really neat sort of technique. And he's written up how to do it. That is the end. Thanks for listening. That was nearly an hour. It's too long. I'm going to keep those shorter. As I said, please give me feedback if you got it. Reach out if you want any information, or if and we'll do this again. I think we'll try and keep it shorter with less content. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.